I'm Shannon Ireland, your host of a Healthy Push podcast. I struggled with anxiety, panic disorder, and agoraphobia for 15 years. Everything used to be hard for me. Even just driving 5 minutes from my house used to feel impossible. But now I absolutely live for travel and adventure, and I experience lots of peace and joy. I've not only reclaimed my life, but I've helped hundreds of others to do the same. Here, we stop managing anxiety and instead we create a healthy relationship with it. One where you say goodbye to the anxious thoughts, symptoms, panic attacks, and fears, and you actually live your life. Forget complicated strategies, quick fixes, or the same old hacks you've heard 100 times before. Each week, I'll bring you simple, actionable advice and honest conversations that lead to real, long-term healing. You aren't just an anxious person, my friend. There are reasons why you're struggling with anxiety, and these are things you can fix and heal from. And this is where that journey begins. Welcome. You're right where you're meant to be. All right, welcome back to a Healthy Push podcast. Today, I have a guest with me, and I feel like I have not done a guest episode in quite a while, so I'm really excited. I came across John Paul on Instagram, and I was like, ooh, dang, his videos are just unique and honest and helpful. And so I think this is going to be a really helpful conversation and just a fun one for me to have. So selfishly, I was like, hey, John Paul, can you come on my podcast? So, John Paul, welcome to a Healthy Push podcast.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that welcome in. Yeah, I just feel really touched to be here.
Oh, good. So, let's start with tell us a little bit about you. Like, who are you as a human?
Yeah, that is a great question. There's a period of time when I put a lot of energy into that question. And to be honest, I think the latter years, probably last 5 years, have been really about kind of letting go of that question of who am I? Because I kind of think that this quest for identity is all a farce. I guess a good place to start is probably the biggest philosophy of mine that kind of guides, the way I interact with the world, the way I interact with conversations is from a guy named Eric Fromm, who was a psychoanalyst back in the day. And he says, our task is not to feel secure, but rather to tolerate insecurity. And I think having some concrete sense of grasping onto an identity, I think it's something that a lot of us believe that everybody has.
Mhm.
And in fact, I think it's something that so often actually gets in the way of us being ourselves because at our core, we're all just a spontaneous becoming. That there's an aspect of the human condition that you can actually never have a stable identity because the very nature of the now is that everything's becoming new and emerging all on its own. So I was actually talking to my wife about this recently because she's in this place of really kind of wanting to personally like rebrand herself, not like professionally or anything, but just kind of saying like, I'm trying to kind of let go of some of these patterns and some of these habits and some of these stuck places that I find myself over and over again, and the way I respond to those stuck places, which is actually usually the stuck place. And one of the things I said to her is, I think so many people in the wellness industry, in coaching, whatever it is, kind of propose this idea that like, okay, you need a new identity. When the fact is that identity is the trap. Because when we bind ourselves to an identity, we give ourselves permission to get stuck in those habits and in those patterns.
Yeah.
But when we allow ourselves to emerge spontaneously, this is actually when we are truly ourselves. But as soon as we say I am this or this is who I am, we put a box around something that's boxless. And so it's one of those kind of esoteric weird things that's like, it doesn't always make sense in explanation. It's something that we have to kind of embody and practice. That's why, like I said, I really like podcasting and making videos. It's something that you can lean into as a practice. So that's kind of my life philosophy. I'm 29 years old. I live in a old steel town that was like there was the highest income per capita at a time. It's outside of Pittsburgh, and then steel got outsourced, and the whole town kind of collapsed. So it's this weird kind of combination. I was raised Catholic, I'm Roman Catholic, and in my youth, when I was in about 5th grade, I got diagnosed with depression, which all I really knew is that I was hurting and nothing was really helpful. And so, I think I had the experience that so many people who kind of come and gravitate towards the healing field do, which is like, I was really hurting, and when I was hurting, I didn't really get the help that I needed. I remember sitting across from this guy, who I'm sure was a really well-intentioned guy, and, I was probably in my teen years by then, and I just thought to myself, "How can it be that I feel so terrible and this guy sucks so bad at his job?" And it wasn't about attacking him, it was just, like, this utter recognition that, like, this isn't helping me.
Yeah.
So then in high school, I got introduced to psychology. The community college offered college courses in high school and took a psychology class. And so it just kind of lit my fire. For one thing, because I was like learning all these things about myself, these defense mechanisms, projection, repression, identification, all these things. But the other side of it was that I've always really loved people and I've always really liked ideas. And psychology was this place where these two things for me came together. And so that kinda started my passion and my love, and, I studied psychology in my undergraduate, and then studied counseling, and what I realized too is, you don't really learn how to be a therapist in grad school. They just convince everybody that you're equipped to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is where, again, the practice is so important to me, that life is a practice. Because the one thing that I graduated realizing was that, like, I have no fucking clue what I'm doing. And so I was exposed to some modalities, CBT and kinda some of the more common modalities, early on, and I just found myself kinda putting people in boxes, and it wasn't that helpful, feeling like I'm putting, kinda square peg in round hole.
Mhm.
And then later I was introduced to approach that was hugely formative, and that was the interpersonal approach, the belief that as persons, we are fundamentally relational. We're created in relationship, we're hurt in relationship, but we can also find healing in relationship.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I loved, loved, loved about this approach was that it put such a heavy responsibility on the practitioner to say, like, you really have to handle your shit.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, and if you ignore all your own demons and your own conflicts, what you're gonna end up doing is just projecting them onto other people and then actually reenacting and recreating the very same themes that hurt people in therapy, leaving them stuck and still believing it's their fault. So that during that time too, I also got, or in grad school, I got exposed to mindfulness and really committed. That was the other thing that was just so consistent through the mindfulness literature and the research that I was reading was this isn't something you can just teach. You can't just read a manual and then teach people how to do it. Like you have to do the practice. And so that's really the foundation for me. That's kind of where I started when I kinda started settling into my career, was this deep and abiding reverence for relationality, for connection, as we were kinda talking about, um, and this really important responsibility that, like, we actually do the work. And so that's a couple months ago, that's where I started my Instagram. I started it, like, 4 months ago, started on May 22nd, 2025. And I have 60,000 followers now, which is kind of wild to me. My intention with starting that was like, I want to be real. I want to be me. And so most of my videos are me walking to my car at the beginning of the day and just throwing something. I was like, hey, this is what's on my mind today. And then with that success, it's kind of opened a lot more opportunity to kind of lean into this kind of stuff. So that's some wide sweeping arcs of my story and how I got here.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing all of that. I think I'm just thinking, of course, about my own therapy journey, and the best experiences I've had in therapy are when I've had a really good connection and relationship with the therapist. And I just think there's so much that comes out of that when you do have that connection. And I think that's exactly why you've grown on Instagram so quickly. It's like you are allowing people in, right? And you're really connecting with people on so many different things and saying things that a lot of people don't hear, right? And thinking in different ways that people aren't always allowing themselves to go there. So I think that it's just been so interesting watching you grow so quickly, which I'm sure comes with its own challenges. But I'm really curious about something because this is something you also don't see very often in this space. So you say that you sort of dance the line between psychology and spirituality. So I would love for you to tell us, like, what does that mean to you and what does that actually look like in your work with clients?
Like I said, I'm Roman Catholic. I grew up in a very conservative area, a very, very religious area. My dad taught at Franciscan University in Steubenville, which is like kind of like one of like the Catholic universities. It's very small, it has like 2,500 people. But it's kind of like one of the 5 universities that's not just Catholic in name, it sticks to the values of that. And so I got exposed to a lot of really beautiful life-giving aspects of spirituality, as well as some, like, things that just, like, pissed me off and didn't make sense. One of the things that drives me nuts is, for example, people say this thing like, "Oh," when something bad happens to someone, people say something like, "Oh, well, God has a plan." And I fucking hate that. Now, I believe it. I believe that statement, but I think it's called a spiritual bypass, which the person is really saying, "Oh, your pain and your difficulty right now, it's too much for me, so I'm gonna give this, like, pietistic, like, phrased answer." Because I had all this issue with the dogma and the rules and all this stuff, like, some of the stuff just felt strange to me or it didn't quite make sense, and so much of it was like, "Do you believe it or don't believe it? You have to believe it," and I kind of got to this point where I said, like, "Okay, forget all the dogma, like, I'm not throwing it out, I'm not ignoring it, but, like, that's not what this is about. If I don't have a personal relationship with God, absolutely none of this matters." And so I really just committed to really seeking, like, who is God? Who am I? For years, my prayer was really like I would sit down to pray and then I would just like wrestle with like, are you there? Are you not? And finally I got so fucking fed up with that that I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just I know I as a person am better when I pray. So I'm gonna take a pragmatic approach here and say, I'm just gonna commit to praying every day, whether I believe in God or not.
Mhm,
And that actually created so much space for me. And I think this is core in these practices, whether it's therapy, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's spirituality, and it's what Aristotle says. He says there's different types of goods in the world, and some things are good because of what they bring about, right? Like a car is good because it gets me from point A to point B, and if it doesn't do that, it's not good. But there's other things that are good because of the nature of who they are. It's in their essence. Things like friendship. Of course, friendship brings about stability and has people to have your back. But that's not what makes friendship good. Friendship is good because we're humans and friendship is connection. And that's something that isn't good because of what it brings about. It's good in itself, even though it brings about all these good things.
mhm,
And so that's kind of one of the other kind of philosophical foundations for me is to do things that are good, not because of what they will bring about. And that opened this spaciousness for me in prayer where I didn't have to wrestle every time I was showing up. I was just showing up. Like the commitment was already there. It's so helpful in mindfulness too of I'm showing up to practice mindfulness not so that I calm down. Um, but rather I'm showing up because paying attention to the present moment and whatever is here in the present moment is good. Period. Full stop.
yeah.
I guess I'm trying to tie it back to this question of dancing the line between spirituality and psychology. One of the things that Mother Teresa says is something along the lines of, my job isn't to convert you to Catholicism. My job is to follow Christ in such a way that it makes you a better human, that you want to be a better Hindu, that you want to be a better Muslim, that you want to be a better Jew, to live in such a way that it doesn't tell you to be like me. it actually draws you more deeply into yourself. Um, so in all this that I share about my spirituality, it's not about like, oh, so you need to believe this. It's really this is the tradition that I've been given that has so many gifts in it, and the has also, in the name of religion, hurt so many people. I'm not kind of blind to that fact, but what I found is that when I dive deep into it, I become better, and I think I also live in a way that welcomes other people, not in a pressured way, but the kind of attitude of like, be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah. No, I am so interested with where you're going and talking about presence because I think that's such a struggle for so many of us. But kind of before we go there, I just want to say, I think that no matter what your connection to spirituality is, I grew up very religious in a very religious home. And it wasn't until I was in college that I started to explore what can this look like for me? And maybe it doesn't have to look the way that I was taught it has to look. And oh my gosh, there are so many different beliefs and ideas. And maybe I can adopt a bunch of these things and it doesn't have to be one thing. And so I think all of that spirituality work really just helps you to connect to yourself more and then in turn allows you to really have those relationships that you want and desire, and it doesn't feel so, "I have to be this person," or "I have to step into this identity," or "This is what people are expecting of me." Like, there's so much freeness in that. So, I mean, that's there are so many conversations in what we're talking about, but I want to talk a little bit about presence because I know so many of my listeners are like, I don't think I'm ever present in a day. I don't think I'm ever really connected. I struggle really badly with being present. So, can you just tell us from your perspective? Because I think we hear this live in the moment, like just live in the moment. And like, what does that really mean from your perspective? Like mindfulness, presence, living in the moment. What is that?
It's certainly something that I'm trying to figure out too. And this is one of my favorite things about mindfulness practice is that it's a mindfulness practice. It's always a practice, and the practice is for life. And what's far more important than having this kind of, locked in quality of being able to focus on what's happening right now is the ability to realize when I have wandered off, the practice of being able to come back here without beating myself up, without attacking. Because when I beat myself up, when I judge myself, that's just more lostness. When I'm on my phone and I really should be with my kids, right? I can take that time to be, oh, what the hell's wrong with me? Or I can just say, like, oh, I'm lost. I'm sucked in.
Mhm,
So my choice right now is to put the phone down and to turn towards my kids. It's a lot simpler and a lot less glamorous than anybody wants it to be.
mhm,
'Cause pretty rarely are there these watershed moments when, like, all of a sudden I have this moment of enlightening, and they do happen, but they're relatively rare. It's a practice that you won't see the fruits of for years. People don't want that, people don't like that, and understandably so, because people are hurting and we want a quick fix, and that's so much what our cultural consciousness is screaming out for in a really unhelpful way, but to me, the intention of being present is not enough, and the encouragement, even as you said, the encouragement of just be more present, just be more present, just be it's not enough. If you are around people who are just kind of, like, telling you, like, "Well, be more present. Try to be more present. Try to be" like, I would encourage you to put up a certain boundary and a certain space between you and those voices, because it may just be another version of, like, well, God has a plan. It has to be a presence, and so the question is not, like, how do I become more present? It's more of what is there to be present to right now. The goal of mindfulness meditation is to eliminate the false boundary between sitting down and doing a formal mindfulness meditation of paying attention to the breath, for example, and the rest of our life. One of the things that I guide people to after I guide them in a mindfulness meditation, oftentimes I'll say, now I want you to open your eyes and I don't want you to transition. I don't want you to end this practice. I want you to open your eyes and carry this sense of awareness with you right now into the day. We're training the habit of what we give priority to. And mindfulness encourages us to say the most important thing we can give our attention to is what's happening right now. And thought is not the most important thing that we can give our attention to. And the reason we say it's non-judgment and non-reactive, it's not some like soft, fluffy, like just be nice to yourself, stop doing those unhelpful things. It's because every judgment is just another thought. Every reaction, it's just another thought. So mindfulness isn't so much about don't be judgmental and don't be critical. It's much more about don't be tied to thought. And judgment and criticism, those are just more clouds in the sky. They're just more thoughts. So what does mindfulness look like? It looks like washing the dishes and feeling the water. It looks like turning the radio off in your car, turning the music off and just driving. A
Mhm.
lot of times it means don't be so addicted to consuming a podcast nonstop. It looks like sitting down and reading a book for an hour. It means, right, when I'm in the morning and I'm trying to pray and I really want to connect with God, this part of me wants to connect with God. And my daughter, who's 8 months old, is walking over towards a electrical outlet to try to pretty much eat electricity is her MO, I'm pretty sure. It means rather than saying, "Gosh, this is my prayer time," it means saying, "Oh, okay. What am I called to in this moment? I'm called to go take care of my daughter." That is what it means to be present. And so, but that it doesn't intention isn't enough. We have to formalize it in a practice so that we're getting the reps in. And the reason we sit down and do a formal meditation practice of paying attention to the breath is it's about the most basic thing we can possibly pay attention to. It's something that's always happening. The breath is also something that's shifting and dynamic enough that there's this steadiness to it, but it's also got kind of enough friction that it's like a little bit easier to pay attention to than, don't do nothing because the mind can't do nothing. But um, we need to find specific and intentional ways to actually practice that presence so that in daily life, we know how to be present to the dishes, to the kids, to work, to our anxiety, to our overwhelm.
Yeah. I love how you did that reframe of like, what is there to be present with right now? Because that's such a simple but really powerful shift. And that's something very practical, right? If people are like, well, what can I do? Because I think so many of us have been sold this idea that it's a task to be present, that like it's something that we can just do, like check a box, like it's a list, right? And that force that I got to do this is so takes you away from the essence of what mindfulness even is. So I love that. I am curious because a lot of the people that I work with are very in their heads, as am I. We love our brains love thinking and we love paying attention to the thinking. And it's such a habit to pay attention to your thinking. And I think so many people are using mindfulness in that way of like, okay, if I just practice paying attention to my breath or I practice using my senses to like pull myself into the present moment, then I'm going to have less thoughts and I'm going to have less anxiety. And yeah, you see where I'm going with this, but it's such a struggle. And I think that this is such a common experience that people share is, I go to therapy and I feel like I'm being told, do mindfulness, like do some breathing, do grounding. And like, and there, of course, there's this frustration of like, I'm doing it and I don't think it's doing anything. It's absolutely making things worse.
Yeah.
So, how do you help clients to move out of their heads? Or is that something that we can really do?
That's not something I can do.
Love
It's
it.
not something I can do, and I mean, I think this is one of the other things too that I'm trying to be really intentional about in my messaging and my products. I can't change you.
Hmm.
I can't. I can't change you. I can't promise you transformation. What I can do is teach you some approaches to yourself that I think can be helpful. But this is the absolute danger of mindfulness just being plugged into the mental health paradigm that we currently use. As I said earlier, there are certain things that we do because they're good, period. There's certain things that are good because of what they bring about. Mindfulness is something that's good, period. But we're trying to use it as something for what it brings about. And so the thinker, the mind, is trying to be mindful. Your mind can't be mindful. The feeling that I'm sitting down and meditating, it's so paradoxical, and that's why the commitment is so important. The commitment to say, I'm gonna practice mindfulness because I believe that paying attention is good. Because if you are anxious, you will sit down and what are you going to focus on? You're actually going to focus on the anxiety. Because mindfulness is not, again, this is just um, spiritual bypass. Oh, I'm just going to get away from my emotions by stepping back. No, if you're practicing mindfulness, you're going to get into your emotions and you're going to feel through them. And so I think that this happens too when things become popularized by people who get them and share the real deep depth of them. And then they get adopted by people who want the results of the depth but don't have the practice.
Hmm.
And so in my actual therapeutic practice, mindfulness to me serves much more of the function of how I approach my clients than it does something that I teach my clients to do. If my clients wanna learn how to meditate, I'm so fucking over the moon and I'm, like, all in there and I'm like, "Let's do it." Like, "Okay, we can." But I believe that if therapy takes on this purely teaching role, it's gonna bring out that part of you that's a student,
Hmm.
and it's gonna bring that part of me that's a teacher, and that puts the capacity for relationality in a certain bracket. And it backfires a lot for me. I haven't figured out how to teach mindfulness to people who don't wanna learn it in a way that helps them. It usually just feels like, as you said, one more thing they have to
Hmm.
do. One
Hmm.
more thing I, as somebody who has it figured out, am trying to jam down their throats, which is usually the exact relational experience that's hurting them in the first place. Mindfulness is the practice of learning to not do. And a great way that I've heard it say is that you can't actually be mindful. Mindfulness, this presence, it's actually an innate quality of your being.
Hmm.
So what we do when we sit for mindfulness practice is rather than trying to intentionally cultivate some experience, because that would just be more agenda,
Hmm.
we are actually just trying to set the stage. And when we set the stage, the mindfulness emerges all on its own. Usually, with my clients in psychotherapy, if people approach me about learning to meditate, I approach that much differently.
Hmm.
But I'll usually make a soft offer of mindfulness for all my clients. And if they bite on it, then we go deeper. But a lot of times it just they're not quite ready for it maybe. I'm not sure if it's that, but it just feels like one more thing.
Yeah, and I think that intention matters so much because I look at a lot of struggles, right, personally that I've been through, and when I've had that intention of like, I can't be in this place. I gotta fix this. I gotta get better. I don't want anyone to see this. That's when I'm just in that cycle that feels so hard to get out of. Like, I can't be present if my life depended on it. And it's like, well, no wonder, right?
Exactly. And that's where I would say what mindfulness means in that moment for me as a practitioner is saying, like, "Shannon, what's happening here? You're so scared." It's actually me being the space
Mhm.
and not trying to convince the part of you that's scared shitless to be present.
Yeah.
It's actually to meet the part of you that's scared shitless from a place of agenda-free agenda and saying like, "Hey, you can be scared shitless right here with me. You're overwhelmed. I can feel your overwhelm. I'm not scared of the overwhelm that you're feeling because this overwhelm isn't really about what's happening right now. It's about a stack of overwhelming experiences that you've been unmet in and you haven't experienced somebody with an encounter with that overwhelm in a way that both affirms it and validates it and doesn't add fuel to the fire and isn't trying to get you to change it because, "Oh my gosh, I'm a therapist and my identity means that I have to be a helper. So if I can't help you calm down, so I'm gonna just throw the whole book at you." I help being people be present by being present to their fear of presence.
I love that. I love that. I know I feel like this is such a theme that pops up for me in therapy is
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
her holding that space for me, right? To just have the thoughts, to have the feelings. I'm just thinking, this morning I've been being so intentional with mindfulness of on my walks. Like I
Yes.
am such a podcast listener. I'm such a let me jam pack as much as I can. So like I'm going to call a friend, I'm going to catch up, and I've been so intentional about not taking my phone, which is a discomfort in and of itself, but just to have it with me. And if I hear the ding or whatever it is, it breaking away from that has been such a challenge because it does bring this discomfort. And I think that's what we were just speaking to, right? Is this real discomfort. And I think when you have that dynamic, not just with a therapist, but with loved ones, with your partner, and like they have the best intentions, but everyone's just like, well, just do this or do that. And it's that you need less doing
Mhm.
and being super intentional with that. And I know going on my walks the past few days, I just noticed this morning too. I'm like, I wouldn't have seen that bird. Like, there's no way I would have seen that bird. Like, just really being reflective of how helpful it's been and how much better I felt too coming back from my walks, being like, I don't even want those moments of like ideas and creativity. Cause like often, you get that stuff when you're more in silence. I just want nothingness sometimes. But to just have those experiences of like, look at that bird. Like, I
Yes.
can hear so much that's going on around me. That simplicity, oh, so helpful.
And this is why I love sound because, especially in meditation, sound has this really unique quality where you can't sustain it in your mind, right? So even if you try to think about what birds sound like right now, you know what you're thinking about,
Mhm.
but there's not a sound here. Now, one of the things that you can learn in mindfulness is to pay attention to thoughts in the same way you pay attention to sounds. That this sound right now, it comes up out of nowhere and then all on its own, it drifts away. And so that going on a walk and just listening to the sounds, when you are present, especially in nature, when you can attend to how much is changing right now, you can immerse yourself in it and you can kind of have those moments of freedom. I mean, the danger here is the part of our mind that is burdened by the thinking is the one that's trying to think in new ways to get rid of the burden. And so this is why, like, we need to learn actually how to step back from that. Getting into nature is one of great ways to do this because you walk around and you say like, "Oh my gosh, no one's ever gonna see this bird. Oh my gosh, everything here in the woods, it's just happening." the trees are just growing at their own pace. The flowers show up, they're so beautiful, and then they die. Like, everything is just happening. And so intentionally showing up to those things is the way that we can train our mind to savor, which can bring about those open experiences. It makes it a little bit easier to connect with the natural capacity of the mind to simply be present. And then the sustained intentional practice is what helps us to learn how to kind of feel what that feels like a little bit more and say like, "Oh, that's it." And then deepen that practice to cultivate that more often.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to go off a little bit here along the lines of what we've been talking about, but I have curiosity on this. So, how do you think spirituality helps deepen our understanding of like these struggles, the struggles of overthinking, not feeling like we can be present? Like, what are your thoughts?
The more I learn, the more I experience in therapy, in mindfulness, in my own experiences of spirituality, in my exposure to the various spiritual traditions around the world, the more and more I'm convinced that the idea of psychology and spirituality being these two separate things is a complete farce. Like, I I think that spirituality and psychology are just two different sides of the same coin, which is the human person. And I think what religion is fundamentally is a psychological framework. We didn't have psychology. There was just only religion and spirituality. And the way that we look at the human person had a pretty fundamental shift a couple 100 years ago. And psychology was proposed as this new way to look at the person. I don't think psychology and spirituality are really much different. I think they are different ways to interpret, different frameworks to interpret and approach the person with different philosophical kind of axioms, foundational beliefs. And so this is why I say, I'd like to dance the line between psychology and spirituality because I really think that they're just two different viewpoints of the same thing. And we look at one side of the mountain and we say, like, no, mountains look like this. This is how mountains are. And we look at the other side of the mountain and we're like, no, this is how mountains look. Or it's like, well, let's integrate both ways of looking at the mountain rather than just seeing, like, hey, guys, it's the same mountain. And you've just lived on two different sides of it at two different times. Spirituality fundamentally is about presence and connection.
Mhm.
I hate like using terms like true spirituality or authentic spirituality because I don't think it creates this kind of false cutoff from other things. But I'm very suspicious of any spiritual approach that promulgates or encourages like disconnection and a lack of presence. Like both connection and presence will always lead us to this dimension of the human person that you can't see, you can't touch, you can't point to, but that draws us more deep in this connection to each other, to all things. And I think that's where all the highest points of spirituality that I've seen always bring us back to that is that it's actually about being connected to humans in a way that appreciates that I'm both a separate person and that puts responsibilities on me. And I'm also part of a community and that puts a responsibility on me.
Yeah, I agree, but I think it took me a very long time to get there, or it felt like it did, because I think when you are raised in a very religious home, especially a religion that has very oh, strict beliefs and ideas, it doesn't really allow for you to have that expansiveness or that I can maybe go off in this other direction that is very much going to connect me to myself. I think when I healed a lot of that, I found that I healed a lot of those parts of me that were hurting and anxious and really overwhelmed. And it's just a really beautiful thing, I think, when you can connect, whatever it looks like for you. I mean, I am, not, I don't identify with a particular religion, but I am very spiritual. And I think to say that now, like with the way I was raised and all the experiences, it's absolutely wild because never would I think. But really, it's about that connection. And I think that's what we keep coming back to. And it's such a beautiful thing. And when you really do heal those parts of yourself, it really does help you to be more present and to be more gentle with yourself. And it doesn't make things feel so like forced and just ick.
I think if you look very broadly at humanity, I think you can see that humanity is developing just like each individual person develops. Where in human development, you see that the person goes back and forth between um, abstract reasoning and concrete reasoning, right? So there's a period at which children learn you follow the rule. And a lot of parents say, well, you got to do it for the right reason, which is absolute bullshit because they don't have the capacity to know the reason. At that point, it's just learning what's the letter of the law, like what's the rule.
Hmm.
Then they can learn, okay, the why. And so humans go back and forth when we're developing through childhood, we're developing between the what and the why, and the what and the why. And so I think one of the things that, for a while, the our cultures were bound by this, you do this. This is the thing that you do. This is the letter of the law. That's that concrete operational. Like this is why this is what you do. Period. And then, right, with the kind of introduction explosion of like kind of a focus on subjectivity and letting go, saying like, oh, that's tyranny. I'm being told what to do. You don't have control over me. Now we kind of swung back in the opposite direction, which is like anything can be done absolutely anyway. And so there's this like back and forth between the spirit and the letter. Like, what's the rule? And okay, why do I practice that rule? We have to learn to play by the rules so we know how and when it's necessary to break them and what the purpose of those rules is in terms of supporting the system. And so I think that this is what maturation is realizing it's more than the rules. It's also more than my opinion. And this is the language of a guy named Father Richard Rohr, who I love. And he says, our task is to transcend and include. Right, we realize that, okay, I'm actually transcending that rule, I'm stepping out of it, it doesn't have to absolutely bind me, but I'm also gonna include the wisdom that's in it, and so we're always kind of like, not just yes or no, but it's yes and no and kinda learning how they integrate.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm so glad that you shared that. Okay, so if people want to find and connect with you and get the wisdom that you share and just have that connection, where can they find you?
Yeah, so they can find me at, really the biggest place right now is Instagram. So my handle is John Paul Dombrowski on Instagram. And then my website, which is actually kind of right under construction right now. So at this very moment, so hopefully that'll be up by, this afternoon. But that's jpdombrowski.com. I also have a YouTube channel where I have like a lot of my meditations and stuff. But then through my website too, I offer personal coaching, which is really the way that I do coaching is really short term. So it's either 1, 3, or 5 sessions because I think a lot of times just drawing this stuff out, it can be helpful, but also I don't think that's for everybody at each time. So I like to kind of do these encounter sessions that's kind of a little bit more about packing a punch.
Hmm.
And then I also will be doing some group offerings, which I absolutely love doing. So I'm putting up a group right now, which is called Practicing Presence.
Oh,
And it's really about stepping into the here and now in the ways that we're talking about and helping other people to do that in the moment.
oh,
So
that's so cool. I love that. Well, I'm sure many people will go and find you. And thank you so much for coming on. It's been such a helpful, fun conversation.
yeah, this has been a joy. Thank you so much, Shannon.
I hope you loved this episode of A Healthy Push. If you have, I'd be so grateful if you could leave me a rating and review wherever you're listening to this podcast. This helps people to find the show and get the support they need. And if you know someone who could use a little push, be sure to share this episode with them. And for even more support, head over to ahealthypush.com for show notes and loads of tips, tools, and inspiration to help you on your recovery journey. I'll see you next week.